Donald Trump is facing more backlash from more Fox News hosts who are reluctantly calling out the Trump administration's abuse of power with respect to orchestrating the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a couple of clips to look at and some things to read because the backlash from Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the National Review, some of the big names in more conventional, conservative, and Trump-aligned politics and media are calling it out.
Today, so that has been unsustainable for a long time. When ABC saw CBS pull the plug on Stephen Colbert, they realized we do not have to continue to make this kind of investment. CBS was the trailblazer. ABC followed suit. They were just waiting for the moment. And unfortunately for Jimmy Kimmel, he threw the door open and invited them to put his show on hiatus indefinitely. Will he come back? We don't know that right now. I do have an issue with some of the statements made by Brendan Carr, because if there were an FCC commissioner on the other side of the political spectrum, from someone maybe on this network, and they didn't like their speech, would they put pressure on, some of some of the advertisers? Yep. And, if someone from Fox moved on to Fox Broadcast, to some of the owned and operated stations there, that's the part of this that I do not like. Well,
and you have a right to feel that way. I mean, again, I don't expect people to defend Jimmy Kimmel because they like him, especially if they're conservative. But I do expect them to stand on principle here, especially given the dangerous precedent this sets. We've already discussed how Brit Hume and Laura Ingraham have called this out. And now, again, we have a couple more. That was Kennedy. This is Kat Timpf, who on Greg Gutfeld's own show also made a similar case.
The FCC is actually not supposed to be engaging in the nuances of content moderation. Its scope is supposed to be very narrow. I'm not sure that the public interest statute has ever been interpreted this way. And I also think the statute in itself is too broad. As narrow as it is, I think it'd be better if it was even narrower. And look, I'm not a Democrat. I'm certainly no fan of Kimmel. Yeah. I hated his comments yesterday. I thought that his comments that we talked about yesterday, as I said, I thought that they represented just a stunning lack of touch with reality. And also, on a personal note, his sister once told me to, and I quote, off and die.
Yes.
So I do have a lot of personal reasons why maybe you would think I would be cheering this, but I'm not. I mean, I've long said I think the FCC has an undue influence on speech, and having the head of the FCC say on a podcast that this should be shut down, that's an arm of the federal government saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way, bothers me. And that's especially true because of Nexstar. The owner of the local TV stations, they were and are looking for a merger that the FCC would have to approve. So the head of the FCC going on a podcast saying this, and then hours later it happens, and then hours later ABC does the same thing. I get the fear of live events. I do live events. Yeah. I also understand the frustration with the hypocrisy. A lot of people who are saying this is, free speech, how dare you, they had no problem with the Biden administration's attempts to quell free speech, whether that's the Disinformation Governance Board or the things they were doing with private social media companies. That's not me. I had problems with those things, too. I also don't really have to wonder if Kimmel would have the same take on my own cancellation. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he would not. I feel confident in saying that he would not. But again, the bottom line for me is you shouldn't want the government to have this kind of power over speech, even if it's speech you absolutely hate, because it could then use that power against you.
Again, similar point to what Kennedy made. Again, this is important because Donald Trump obsessively watches Fox News. So to the extent that he's going to be made aware of any of the potential consequences, not that he would care, because presumably if a Democrat is ever in a position to wield that power, it's because Trump is out of office and Trump won't give a shit, right? But those around Trump, like Brendan Carr, should be concerned about the precedent that this will create. I also want to point out the backlash that he's getting from the Wall Street Journal, for example. The Wall Street Journal is the sister publication of Fox News. Now, again, like any other conservative outlet, they do a lot of throat clearing. They don't like Jimmy Kimmel. The left engages in cancel culture all the time. Now, I'll point out that much of what they consider to be cancel culture was actually just people, organizing boycotts and putting pressure in their private capacity as citizens, not the federal government. Some references are made to what about the federal governments? Like, for example, I hear a lot, what about the Hunter Biden laptop? Joe Biden, he used his power to kill the Hunter Biden laptop story. The Hunter Biden laptop story was briefly suppressed on Twitter in 2020 when Joe Biden wasn't in power. He was just a candidate for office. Donald Trump was the one in power. Examples like that. But again, even the Wall Street Journal is not happy about this. The FCC, Disney, and Jimmy Kimmel, the right gives the left a dose of cancel culture, and regulatory abuse. Maybe now our progressive friends understand why these columns oppose government control of business and fought liberal cancel culture. Regulatory power in the hands of a willful president can too easily become a weapon against political opponents, including the media. That's what happened Wednesday, as Brendan Carr, Donald Trump's FCC chair, threatened Disney and its affiliates if they didn't punish Jimmy Kimmel for comments about Charlie Kirk. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, said Carr, in words that could have been uttered by a New Jersey mob boss. The FCC has power over broadcast licenses, so the threat had teeth, and it goes into, Nexstar, which we've already discussed exhaustively, things of that nature. As a private company, Disney has the right to run or cancel shows as it wishes. Perhaps in this case, it saw pressure from the government as an excuse to drop Kimmel, who had turned his show into daily anti-Trump diatribe. But anyone who thinks this is the free market at work is ignoring the ways that government can punish companies. Disney's executives had to look out for the best interests of their shareholders and the Disney brand. All the more so given how Trump has pursued retribution against political opponents in his second term. So again, even the Wall Street Journal's conservative sister publication, the Wall Street Journal, again, owned by the News Corp umbrella, they are a sister publication with Fox News. They acknowledge Trump is on a revenge spree. He's used regulatory leverage against Paramount and CBS in a weak lawsuit and squeezed liberal law firms to do pro bono work, while the Justice Department is investigating prosecutors who brought cases against him. A regulator like Carr might have ignored Trump's musings about revenge in the first term, doesn't need his direct orders in the second. The squeeze on Disney looks to be a case of cancel culture on the right. Kimmel's comments on Monday were callous, false, and stupid, but they weren't inciting violence, and in a free society, they shouldn't be the cause for the government to push someone off the airwaves. Compared to the malevolent garbage in social media about Kirk and his killer, Kimmel's words were only mildly offensive. But the MAGA masses are understandably furious about the Kirk assassination, and they want the left to be punished. In this desire, they can point to progressive institutions that have canceled conservatives far and wide. Again, it goes into the Sinclair situation. It says Disney fired an actress in The Mandalorian who expressed politically incorrect views. NBC pushed out Megyn Kelly for comments deemed insensitive. None of this had anything to do with the government, by the way. The Biden White House urged tech platforms to censor contrarian views on COVID. So did the Trump White House. And again, this is markedly different because we're talking about a disease that killed 1 million people, more than 1 million Americans. That's a bit infinitely more substantive. Not even just a bit. It's infinitely more substantive than overtly and aggressively and unprecedentedly flexing the FCC to punish a late-night talk show host because he made a joke about Trump, right? Again, so this is just infinitely worse by any metric. Most important is that for a decade or so, the voters who backed Trump watched and listened as the coastal elites of media and entertainment show their contempt for middle American values. Again, yada, yada. It's a conservative publication. We want to be clear that none of this justifies the right's resort to regulatory censorship. As victims of cancel culture for so long, conservatives more than anyone should oppose it. They will surely be the targets again when the left returns to power. That's why these columns have urged Carr and Congress to pursue deregulation of the airwaves. The FCC doesn't regulate cable TV or the internet, though many Democrats argued for both when they controlled Washington. Imagine what the Carr FCC would now be doing had they succeeded. The political cycle of using government to punish opponents is taking the country into dark corners that will result in less freedom and less free speech for all sides. The best immediate remedy is getting the FCC out of business of regulating the media. Then you have the National Review. They went one step further, and they're like, we should abolish the FCC. So let's take a look again. This is another major publication of the right, and this is their editorial board's assessment. This, again, is referring to Jimmy Kimmel's comments. They said this was not true, and he should have known that it was not true. But it also wasn't worthy of the vague threats of government sanction. But laws governing the FCC are broad enough that the agency can police almost any content in broadcast media in the public interest. If we believe that that's not the sort of thing the government should be doing, then there is no reason for the FCC to exist. The FCC exerts power over broadcasters by threatening to revoke their licenses. These licenses exist on the legal fiction that the federal government owns the airwaves because broadcast frequencies are scarce. Scarcity logic doesn't apply to other scarce resources, i.e. nearly all other resources, etc. and so forth. So again, it just quibbles with the logic of it. Skip down here. Okay, here we go. This is where it gets back to Jimmy Kimmel. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr said after Kimmel's comments, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Broadcasters got the hint and announced they would be dropping Kimmel's show from their stations. Defenders of the administration have since claimed that the broadcasters did so entirely on their own with no pressure from the government. But if you don't want to be accused of practicing bullying government, it would be helpful for government officials to not talk like bullies. The FCC shouldn't have this power because it shouldn't exist. And again, it goes on like that. Again, it's making the case against the FCC. Okay, here we go. Empowering so-called independent agencies with nebulous laws that cover vast swaths of American industry is an open invitation for abuse by politicians and bureaucrats. The FCC is no longer needed, if it ever was. Rather than fantasizing about using government power to punish the left, leaving open the invitation to be punished again when Democrats regain power, Republicans should foreclose the possibility of future suppression by shutting down the FCC. So they're clearly not happy with where things are. Some other National Review little essays here. There's more to be said in the future about the dizzying reality that for the first time in my living memory, media organizations are visibly and cravenly acting under pressure from the MAGA right to censor and shape their cultural output rather than pressure from the cultural left. The fact that this would be happening independent of Trump's threats is precisely the reason that he has decided to thrust himself into the position of leading the parade. What horrifies you thrills many of his supporters, and he wants to make sure they give him the credit for it, not themselves. So again, calling that out. This is Andy McCarthy, if I remember correctly. No, Philip Klein, excuse me. Philip Klein. Well, I'm obviously an opponent of the efforts by the previous administration to suppress conservative speech. I still believe that the proper response is to push to allow more speech than create an excuse for the radical left to go even further in their efforts to crack down on dissent the next time they get the chance. I'm sure there are many Democrats out there who can think of creative ways to deploy the FCC's reinvigorated use of the public interest rule or pull other levers to target conservatives. If anything, instead of reinvigorating the FCC, conservatives should be looking to abolish it, etc. and so forth. You see the point. So there's starting to be increasing pushback from, again, some Fox News hosts. We already covered a few podcasters, etc. and so forth, and now the Wall Street Journal and the National Review. To the extent that there are any principled actors, they are publicly pushing back on this, and this is very important because, again, to the extent that Trump will change course at all, the only possibility, and it's not much of one, but the only possibility is if it comes from people on his own side. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.